What is up, guys? Randomonium here with your LCS recap for Week 4. In this video, I'm going to break down every single game from NA and EU LCS in Week 4. I'm going to talk about which teams won and, more importantly, why they won. I'm also going to be talking about the meta shifts that are happening in the LCS and what I predict to happen in the future as teams shift their team comps. So yeah, this video is going to break down every single game from week 4. So if there are certain games that you have not watched from week 4 and you don't want the results spoiled, please stop watching this video now, watch the games you want to watch, and then come back to this video later. I am also on vacation right now, so I will not be having any highlights associated with the games. I'm just going to be doing a discussion on every single game. If you guys miss those highlights and you want to see them in the future, please let me know with a comment. I'll make sure that I include highlights in my future videos. Let's get into the games. The first game was Elements versus Vitality. Definitely thought that Vitality was going to win this game, and they did. Elements went for kind of a scaling comp that was really dependent upon Gangplank, and Vitality just did really well in the early game, did much better with objective trading, and just had superior shot calling and just completely won the game. So we're seeing that a lot of these scaling comps are struggling if they can't hold their own in the early and mid game. All right, our next game is Giants versus Fnatic. I thought the Fnatic was going to win this game easily, and they did. From Giants, we're seeing the same mistakes, the same pick mistakes, the same shot calling mistakes. Yet again, Giants picks up the Ari and gets counterpicked with the LeBlanc. It just feels like Giants is not learning from their mistakes week to week. It doesn't seem that they're really analyzing the videos and correcting their play week to week, and the rest of the teams in the EU LCS are just uh, improving much quicker than Giants is. And we saw that in this game. Fnatic won every single lane. They counterpicked really well in the pick ban phase. They just absolutely dominated every facet of this game. Okay, next up is G2 versus Origin. G2 is playing fantastic. They went for an engage comp versus a scaling poke comp from Origin, and this is what I thought was going to happen. As these poke comps become stronger and more popular, you're going to start seeing engage comps becoming more popular to counter them. Um, Origin did the right thing where they kind of tried to stall out the game and stack up dragons, allowing Ezreal to farm up and really reach kind of his power spikes. But G2 did a really great job punishing Origin's mistakes, and it turned out that one bad Baron call allowed G2 to win the game. So really great job by G2. They really played to their strengths, really played to what their comp was designed to do, which was win team fights and punish people for mistakes. But I'm really interested to see how this poke comp versus engage comp turns out in future weeks. All right, next up we have Rockcat versus Unicorns of Love. Unicorns of Love wound up winning this game. I thought that they were going to win this game. Rockcat came out with this just really strange comp. They had a Maokai, Lee Sin, and they rounded out with a Lulu, Kalista, and Braum. And it was really weird because they would engage in favorable team fights and then they would just lose the team fight. I think that had to do a lot with the fact that Unicorns of Love had better shot calling, but they also had a more cohesive team competition. I mean, if you look at Unicorns of Love, I mean, it just makes sense their team comp. They've got the Gangplank, they've got the Victor, they've got the Ezreal, they've got scaling components, they've got AoE components, they've got wave clear components. It just makes a lot more sense that Rockat's comp. And Unicorns of Love was just had a cleaner game and definitely deserved the win. Okay, next up is HK versus Splice. Um, so this game was kind of interesting because Splice was able to go even in the early game, but H2K did a fantastic job at rotating their winning lane, which was the Lucian Janna lane. So they took the bottom tower and they just kept rotating Lucian Janna from lane to lane to lane, and that allowed them to get a tower lead, and that allowed H2K to basically get a superior gold lead, and then they basically just punished Splice's mistakes, had superior team fighting, and was able to win the game from there. Splice on the other side, their split pusher, Poppy in top lane, just was very ineffective the entire game, and they just had very poor shot calling. They didn't look like they were on the same page at all. Poppy would charge in and nobody would be there to help her. So yeah, HUK definitely won the game, and they did a fantastic job rotating their winning lane around the map. And you definitely should watch this game and look at what they do and try to mimic that in solo queue. All right, G2 versus Splice is our next game. G2 yet again, they're looking like a fantastic team. They had better team fights, had complete control over the game. They had a faster lane swap. Splice was always just a step behind. They could never trade objectives equally with G2, and that allowed G2 to just accelerate their gold lead and just completely snowball the game. So yeah, I definitely think the G2 is one of the top teams in EU right now. They've definitely proven that. All right, next game up is Elements versus H2K. This was a really strange game because when you looked at H2K, they literally each person picked their champion. So top laner picked Poppy, jungler picked Elise, mid laner picked Victor, and they picked them in order. So it was Poppy first pick, Elise second pick, Victor third pick, Ezreal fourth pick, Janna fifth pick. And that was just really weird. It almost seemed like kind of disrespectful. Like HUK was like, "Well, we don't even need to hide our comp from you because we're just gonna completely destroy you." And then once we actually got into the game, HUK gave the first three kills to Janna, and it almost looked like he was on purpose, and it looked like he was like another sign of disrespect. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it looked like H2K was being disrespectful to Elements in kind of a tongue-in-cheek way. Um, but Elements kind of handled it really well, and they actually went even with H2K for most of the game. Um, one poor Baron call ended up costing Elements the fight, but H2K just they didn't look the same. They had poor shot calling, and then there was this weird kind of vibe I got that H2K was not taking Elements serious at all. So hopefully H2K does not do that in future weeks because it might wind up costing them the game in the future. All right, Unicorns of Love versus Vitality. I thought this was going to be a really close game. Unicorns of Love wound up winning it. If you look at the pick phase, Unicorns of Love did a fantastic job because they picked up the Lucian first round because Kalista was banned out. And then Vitality did not pick up their 80 carry in their first pick phase. And that allowed Unicorns of Love to pick up Corki for mid lane. And that forced Vitality to not have a top tier 80 carry. So they wound up having to go with Jinx. And Vitality did a really good job recovering. They picked up the Jinx and they picked up the Ari, so they had this AoE damage comp, and they had some good pick potential with the Elise and the Thresh. The real problem was that Fiora was completely ineffective pretty much the entire game. And Unicorns of Love had a superior early game, they had superior rotations, and even though Vitality tried to come back towards the end and they got some really favorable team fights where Unicorns of Love clumped up and Jinx was allowed to get a lot of damage, it really was kind of too little too late, and Unicorns of Love was able to still get the win. All right, next up is Origin versus Giants. So you see that Origins drafted this team fight comp, while Giants drafted kind of this poke control comp that we saw was really popular, like in week 3. And Origin just was the better team. They had superior rotation, superior team fighting. Giants was always behind this entire game, though we did see some flashes of brilliance. Like Giants has skilled players on their team, but they're acting like 5 solo queue players. They're not acting like a team yet. And Giants really needs to go back and analyze these games and identify their mistakes and correct them. That's the most important thing. They keep making the same mistakes over and over again, week to week. So they need to, if they're going to have a shot at winning a game this split, they need to actually be correcting those mistakes and coming up with better engages, better setups, and better picks for their team. Okay, Fnatic versus Roccat. Um, Roccat looked really good in this game. They drafted a late game team comp, but they had really good early game ganks and they controlled most of the game. Fnatic had a mid game comp, but they didn't win the mid game. They did a good job objective trading to try and stay even in the game, but Fnatic was really behind for most of the game. And I actually thought that Rockcat was going to win um, because they had the better scaling comp. But Fnatic was able to get one great team fight that allowed them to win the game. So, kind of a sigh of relief for Fnatic. Rockcat played really well, and Fnatic definitely made some mistakes. They didn't look as strong as you would expect from a top tier team. Okay, moving on to NA. First game was Team Liquid versus Dignitas. Team Liquid, yet again, they went back to these kind of comfort picks: the Caitlyn, the Bard, uh, the Nidalee, things like that. They had very great team fighting. It was just a fantastic, clean game from Team Liquid. Even though the Dignitas drafted a good comp, I can't really fault them on their pick bans. Had a very good Lulu comp. Uh, in game, they weren't on the same page. They had poor teleports, poor objective trading. Team Liquid just looked like a much better team. They looked like on a completely different level than Dignitas. So Team Liquid is definitely improving every week, every game. All right, next up is Cloud9 versus Renegades. Cloud9 wound up winning this game. And this was the first game that we saw where Rush is like an amazing jungler. He's probably the best jungler in NA. But this was the first game where we saw Rush not just punishing the enemy jungler, but actually turning that pressure into an advantage for his lanes. So I think that Cloud9 is beginning to figure out how they can utilize Rush, and that's going to be really scary in the future because if High can figure out how to best utilize Rush, then Rush can single-handedly win games for Cloud9. But Cloud9 definitely has superior shot calling with High. They had superior rotations, had great late game team fights. And Renegades was they were really reactive, they were really slow, and they were really obvious. With any plays they went for, Cloud9 was already there, ready to counter it. So yeah, Cloud9 is looking fantastic. They look like they're really starting to mesh and be able to work really well together. Okay, CLG versus Immortals. I was really interested in this game. Um, CLG kind of drafted this, pick burst comp. They had the Rise, they had the Zillion stun, the Braum, who can also get another stun, and they got the burst from the Graves and the Lucian. And then Immortals went for this kind of poke sustain comp that they tried also last week. They had the Soraka, they have a Nidalee with heals, and then they drafted the Cho'Gath really late in the draft, which is kind of a cool pick, I thought. Um, yeah, I definitely really liked how Immortals structured their pick and ban phase. I still think that they are on another level compared to the other teams when it comes to pick ban. They always seem like they get the better of the pick ban phase. Um, CLG was really reactive in the early game, and that kind of really limited what plays CLG could go for. And then whenever they went for one of those plays, Immortals was able to counter it. And even though CLG was able to get kills, they were able to get picks. They weren't able to get objectives off of those picks. And then whenever Immortals got a kill, they were able to get objectives off of those kills. And that really was the difference between Immortals winning and CLG winning. All right. Next up is TSM versus Echo Fox. Echo Fox obviously is one of kind of the worst teams in NA right now, while TSM is trying to be one of the best teams in NA. But it didn't really look like that. Like if you took the name tags off of both of the teams, you would have had no idea that TSM was playing in this game. Um, Echo Fox went pretty much even with them. They had the kill advantage, while TSM had the farm advantage. Really, what allowed TSM to get ahead was that they turned kills into objectives, while Echo Fox was not able to get any objectives off of the kills that they got. But TSM did not look like a top tier team. They really struggled against Echo Fox, and that's incredibly worrisome for TSM. Echo Fox played well, they went blow for blow against TSM. But yeah, I definitely am worried that TSM is not they're not accelerating as much as I would expect them to in the mid part of the season. All right, Energy versus Team Impulse. Um, Energy did a really great job with Bard and Corki. They did some fantastic Tempered Fate, some fantastic use of the package, but they did not look as clean as before. They really actually struggle against Team Impulse, and Team Impulse is not a top-ranked team. I would have expected that NRG would have completely dominated this game, and they didn't. Team Impulse played to their strengths. They were even pretty much the entire game, and it really was just like minor mistakes that allowed NRG to win the game. It really looked like NRG was kind of trying to go for outplays rather than like setting up really cohesive team fights, and they would rush into team fights when they really weren't ready for them. So yeah, Energy did not look like a top team in this game. So I'm going to be very curious to see what Energy does to improve in the next week. All right, Immortals versus Team Liquid. I feel like uh, this game was really close, but Team Liquid was not setting up for their plays properly. They were fighting every single team fight from a disadvantage, and they were doing well in the team fights. But against a team like Immortals, even if you make a tiny mistake, Immortals is going to punish you for it. So if Team Liquid had set up properly for team fights, if they had set up properly for their plays, um, I definitely think that they could have won the game, but they just were not as clean as Immortals. Immortals had just like constant pressure in the jungle. They were able to set up a lot of vision in Team Liquid's jungles, and they were able to get a lot of really great flanks with Echo, which really allowed them to swing the game in their favor. But yeah, I definitely think the Team Liquid looked really strong. They played really well against Immortals, which is obviously the best team in NA. And I think that Team Liquid is going to learn a lot from this game because they were really close. If a couple of things had changed, if they had just been a little bit cleaner, they could have made that a really close game against Immortals. All right, Cloud9 versus NRG. This was definitely an upset. Cloud9 got the win. And NRG, yet again, didn't look like a top tier team in this game. Cloud9 was just always anticipating what NRG was going to do, and they just constantly kept the pressure up, and that forced NRG to use Gangplank ultimates and Lucian ultimates defensively rather than offensively. And then when a team fight would break out, NRG wouldn't have those ultimates available, and then Cloud9 had superior team fighting and was able to pick up the win because of that. NRG did do a good job punishing some of the mistakes, but Cloud9's shot calling was just on a completely different level than NRG, and that allowed Cloud9 to get the win. All right, Renegades versus TSM. Um, yeah, this is yet again. This is another time where if you took the name tags off the players, you would have no idea that TSM was playing this game. Svenskeren had an amazing game on Kindred. I think this was the best game I've seen Svenskeren play all split. He just had a ton of jungle pressure, was just all over the map, did a great job. But Renegades won the early game and the mid game. They really were really far ahead. They had a lot of kills on Ryze. They had a lot of kills on Draven. And if it wasn't for a horrible Baron call that they made around the 20-minute mark, Renegades probably would have won this game. So yeah, Renegades went for a really bad Baron call. TSM punished them for that, and that gave TSM a chance back into that game. They were able to close the gold differential to about 1,000 gold. And then TSM made a horrible Baron call, and that allowed Renegades to go up about 3,000 gold. And then it got super late into the game, and pretty much it was all on the 80 carries, and it was all on Draven for Renegades or Kalista for TSM. And TSM just had the superior late game team fights. They were able to pick off Draven, and that allowed TSM to win the game. But it was not a clean win for TSM. They should not have struggled this much against Renegades. Especially if TSM wants to be that team that wins the playoffs, that goes to Worlds. They can't struggle against these lower ranked teams like Renegades. Okay, CLG versus Impulse. Um, so Impulse drafted kind of this really high risk, high reward comp where they didn't have any tanks. The problem is that they were just way too predictable and way too reactive. Impulse does well when they're able to be chaotic, when they're able to force team fights at very weird times, at very weird angles. And CLG was just, predicted everything that Impulse was going to do. They had superior team fighting, superior rotations, and they really just snowballed the game out of control. And this is where you see like the difference between CLG and the difference between like Energy and TSM. NRG struggled with Impulse, and CLG absolutely dominated them. And this is what you look for in top ranked teams. Top ranked teams should be able to dominate the lower ranked teams. If you have a team struggling against lower ranked teams, they're not a top ranked team. So CLG is definitely proving that they are a top ranked team, and I definitely have some doubts about NRG and TSM right now. All right, Dignitas versus Echofox. This was a really long, messy game. I do think that Echofox did a good job disguising their picks. Um, Also, Echofox didn't have any bans in this game because they had some late substitutions. Um, but they did a really good job getting picks and objective trading with Team Dignitas. Um, Dignitas was able to kind of stay in the game, but Echo Fox was definitely kind of ahead for most of the game, just barely. And it really came down to just one team fight that won the game. And Dignitas just had, better team fights than Echo Fox. Echo Fox was better getting picks, but Dignitas had better team fighting, and that's what allowed them to get the win. But definitely not a clean game for either team. I definitely am looking for Dignitas to look at this video and improve off of it if they want to try and get to the playoffs this split. All right, so let's go on to the conclusions for this week and also my predictions for future weeks. So what we're beginning to see is the difference between the top teams and the lower ranked teams. It's how many objectives they can get off of kills. Every single team in both NA and EU can get kills. They all have great players on their teams. They all are mechanically skilled. The difference between teams is what teams can get objectives off of the kills. And that's what you're seeing with like Immortals and H2K. They just get so many objectives off of every single kill they get. They just completely snowball the games out of control off of only one or two kills. We're also seeing that engage comps are becoming much more popular to counter these poke comps that were really popular in like week 3. And you're also starting to see that a lot of these poke comps are starting to incorporate more sustain and disengage. So you're starting to see Janna, you're starting to see Soraka, Nidalee, a lot of disengage, a lot of sustain to try and deal with these engage comps, to try and deal with a lot more of these high damage comps that we're seeing. Um, and we're also starting to see that games are starting to last longer. We're starting to see, 35, 40, 45-minute games. So that's going to favor a lot of scaling comps and team fight comps. And why do I say that it's going to favor team fight comps? Because if you get to the late game, all it takes is one team fight to win the entire game. Even if you're down on gold, if you're able to get to the 40 or 50-minute mark in a game, if you win one team fight, you can completely win the game because death timers are so long. So as games start getting longer and longer, I'm going to start seeing, I expect to see a lot more scaling comps, and I expect to see a lot more team fight comps become a lot more powerful. As far as who I think are the best teams in NA and EU, I still think that Immortals is the best team in NA, and I still think that H2K is the best team in EU. However, I think the gap is closing. I think that Immortals is not as good, or it's not as. I think that CLG and Cloud9 and a lot of the other teams are catching up with Immortals. They're not having as dominant victories as they were previously. And H2K is also showing some flaws in their games. So I'm a little bit worried that Immortals and H2K might not be the top dogs for the remainder of the split. As far as my second tier teams, I moved NRG and TSM down because I don't feel like they're looking like top ranked teams. They should be able to beat these lower ranked teams convincingly if they're a top ranked team, and I'm not seeing that. I am seeing that from CLG and from Cloud9, who are performing very well. Their shot calling is really great, and they're just very clean. On the EU side, I still think that G2, Fnatic, Unicorns of Love, and Vitality are all top tier teams. G2 has definitely earned a spot. I'm really excited to see H2K go up against G2 to see who really is the top dog in EU. But then if you look at the third tier, I have NRG, Team Liquid, and TSM. I feel like Team Liquid is continuing to improve, but they're not quite at that point where I would put them as a second tier team. And then I still think that Origin is in the third tier. They're about to be in the second tier, but they're still showing a lot of mistakes that they need to improve upon if they want to really kind of challenge the other top ranked teams in EU. Rounding out the bottom of the groups, I have Renegade, Dignitas, Team Impulse, and Echo Fox as fourth tier. I also think that Elements is slightly better than Rock Hat, Splice, and Giant, so I put them in a different tier than those three teams. But all of those teams, they really need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how they're going to avoid relegation later in the split, because now we're getting into crunch time where every single game is going to matter to determine who's going to be at the bottom of the pack as opposed to who's going to be at the middle of the pack. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you like the content on the channel, please subscribe. And if you agreed with anything I had to say, or if you disagree with anything I have to say, please leave a comment. I love to have discussions with people and get different theories on what's going on in the LCS. So I hope you guys have a great day. This is Randomonium signing off.